In the scorching heat of Afghanistan, where death whispers through every mountain pass and trust is measured in milliseconds, a figure emerged from the shadows that would rewrite everything the military thought they knew about warfare. She had no name, no face that anyone could remember, and no past that anyone dared to question. But when she picked up that rifle, even the most decorated SEAL commanders would fall silent, their breath catching as a single word echoed through their encrypted communications, a code name that carried more weight than any medal, more fear than any enemy, and more respect than any rank. This is the story of how mockery turned to awe, how prejudice crumbled under precision, and how one woman's trigger finger became the thin line between life and death for America's most elite warriors. What you're about to discover will challenge everything you believe about heroes, warfare, and the deadly art of the perfect shot. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on forward operating base Chapman as Staff Sergeant Sarah Chun stepped off the dusty transport helicopter, her gear bag slung over one shoulder and her rifle case gripped firmly in her other hand. The rotors kicked up a cloud of sand that stung her eyes, but she kept her expression neutral as she surveyed her new assignment. Afghanistan was exactly as brutal as she had expected, but she had not come here for comfort. Around her, soldiers went about their daily routines, most barely glancing at the new arrival. Those who did notice her presence exchanged knowing looks and barely concealed smirks. Word had already spread through the base about the Pentagon's latest experiment in diversity and inclusion. A female sniper, they whispered, assigned to provide overwatch for SEAL team operations. The idea seemed almost laughable to most of the battle-hardened warriors who called this desolate outpost home. Sergeant First Class Mike Torres was the first to approach her as she made her way toward the barracks. He was a thick-set man with arms like tree trunks and a face weathered by countless deployments. His eyes held the kind of skepticism that came from seeing too many soldiers crumble under the pressure of real combat. "You must be the sniper they sent us," he said, his tone carrying just enough respect to avoid being openly insubordinate, but lacking any real warmth. "I'm Torres. I run logistics for the SEAL support operations here." Sarah nodded, setting down her rifle case carefully. "Staff Sergeant Chun, reporting for duty." Torres glanced at the case, then back at her face. "That your primary weapon?" "Modified M24 SWS with custom optics and trigger work," she replied without emotion. "Effective range extends beyond standard specifications." "Right," Torres said, clearly unimpressed. "Well, Chun, I hope you understand what you've gotten yourself into. This isn't some training exercise back at Benning. Out here, when we call for overwatch, we need someone who can put rounds on target when lives are hanging in the balance. The boys don't have time to babysit anyone who can't handle the pressure." Other soldiers had begun to gather around, drawn by curiosity and the novelty of the situation. Most were trying to look busy, but their attention was clearly focused on the conversation. Sarah could feel their eyes on her, measuring, judging, waiting to see if she would crack under the obvious skepticism. "I understand perfectly," she said, her voice steady and professional. "When do I meet my spotter?" Torres chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "That will be Corporal Jackson. He's been requesting a new partner for months after his last sniper took some shrapnel in Helmand. Poor kid's been stuck doing regular infantry work while waiting for a replacement." As if summoned by his name, a young soldier approached the group. Corporal Danny Jackson looked like he was barely old enough to shave, let alone serve in a combat zone. His uniform was clean, but showed the telltale signs of someone who had been in country long enough to know the reality of their situation. When he saw Sarah, his expression shifted from curiosity to poorly concealed disappointment. "Ma'am," he said with a slight nod, "I'm Jackson. Guess I'll be working with you." The lack of enthusiasm in his voice was obvious to everyone present. Sarah had encountered this reaction before during her training and previous assignments, but it still stung. She had worked twice as hard as her male counterparts to earn her position, had scored higher on marksmanship tests than 90% of the snipers in the Army, and had completed every qualification course with distinction. None of that seemed to matter when faced with the ingrained prejudices of combat soldiers who had never seen a woman prove herself under fire. "When can we head to the range?" she asked, directing her question to Torres. "Range time is limited," he replied with a shrug. "We've got priority missions that need prep work. Maybe tomorrow if nothing urgent comes up." It was a dismissal, plain and simple. Sarah recognized the tactic. Make her wait, let her stew in the doubt and skepticism, see if she would fold under the pressure of being unwanted. She had seen it before, and she knew the only way through it was to demonstrate her capabilities when the opportunity finally presented itself. That evening, Sarah sat alone in the mess hall, methodically eating her meal while conversations flowed around her. Most of the talk centered on upcoming operations, equipment failures, and the usual complaints that define military life in a combat zone. But she could feel the undercurrent of discussion about her presence, the speculation about how long she would last before requesting a transfer back to a safer assignment. $10 says she's gone within a week, someone whispered from a nearby table. "I'll take that bet," another voice replied. "But I say 3 days max. First time she hears incoming fire, she'll be crying for her mama." Sarah kept eating, her expression unchanged, but every word burned into her memory. She had heard similar comments throughout her career, and they had always served as fuel for her determination. Let them doubt. Let them mock. Soon enough, they would learn who she really was. Later that night, she lay on her bunk in the small room she had been assigned, staring at the ceiling and listening to the distant sounds of the base settling into its nighttime routine. Her rifle case lay beside her bed, unopened since her arrival. Inside was not just a weapon, but the culmination of years of dedication, training, and sacrifice. Every modification had been carefully chosen and tested. Every scope adjustment had been verified across thousands of rounds in every conceivable condition. The rifle itself told a story that none of these soldiers knew. It had been with her through sniper school at Fort Benning, where she had outshot every male candidate in her class. It had been her companion during advanced urban sniper training, where she had learned to make impossible shots through narrow windows and around obstacles. It had saved her life twice during her deployment in Iraq, where she had provided overwatch for convoy operations and earned 2 Bronze Stars for her actions under fire. But here, none of that mattered. Here, she was just another diversity hire in the eyes of men who had never seen her work. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Commander James Mitchell, the SEAL team leader stationed at the base, had received intelligence about a high-value target operating in the mountains 30 kilometers north of their position. The target was responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces and had been tracked to a compound that offered excellent defensive positions and multiple escape routes. Sarah was sitting in the armory, finally allowed to zero her rifle on the small practice range behind the motor pool, when Torres approached with a grim expression. "Chun, you're up," he said without preamble. "We've got a real-world mission, and Commander Mitchell specifically requested a sniper team for Overwatch." She looked up from her rifle, where she had been making minute adjustments to her scope. "When do we deploy?" "Briefing in 1 hour. Mission launches at 0400 tomorrow." Torres paused, his expression serious. "Look, I know there's been some talk around here about your assignment, but this is the real deal. If you're not ready for it, now's the time to speak up. These SEALs are depending on accurate overwatch, and there's no room for error." Sarah set down her tools and looked Torres directly in the eye. "Sergeant, I didn't come here to play soldier. I came here to do my job. You'll get the overwatch you need." Torres studied her for a moment, then nodded. "We'll see. Get your gear squared away and report to the briefing room. And should make sure your partner knows what he's gotten into." As Torres walked away, Sarah turned back to her rifle. 3 more shots to confirm her 0, and then she would be ready for whatever waited in those mountains. Around her, she could sense the change in atmosphere. Word was spreading that the new sniper would finally get her chance to prove herself. Some soldiers were placing bets on whether she would freeze up under pressure. Others were making crude jokes about what would happen when the shooting started. But Sarah blocked out all the noise and focused on the familiar weight of her rifle, the precise feel of the trigger, and the clear sight picture through her scope. Tomorrow, in the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan, all the mockery and doubt would be put to the test. Tomorrow, she would show them exactly what Staff Sergeant Sarachan was capable of. Jackson approached as she was packing her rifle case. The young corporal looked nervous but determined. "Ma'am, I've been thinking about tomorrow," he said quietly. "I know some of the guys have been giving you a hard time, but I want you to know that I've got your back. Whatever happens out there, we're a team." Sarah smiled slightly, the first genuine expression of warmth she had shown since arriving at the base. "Thank you, Jackson. That means more than you know. But tomorrow, just do your job, and trust me to do mine. Everything else will work itself out." As the sun set over the Afghan mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red, Sarah felt the familiar calm that came before action. Tomorrow would bring danger, violence, and the ultimate test of her abilities. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, with her rifle ready and her skills honed to a razor's edge. The mocking would end soon enough. The briefing room was thick with tension as Commander James Mitchell stood before a map of the target area, his weathered face serious in the harsh fluorescent lighting. Around the room, members of SEAL Team 7 sat in folding chairs, their expressions focused and professional. At the back of the room, Sarah and Jackson occupied 2 seats, drawing occasional glances from the elite operators who would be depending on their overwatch. Intelligence indicates that Ahmad Nazir, our high-value target, will be at this compound for a maximum of 6 hours, Mitchell began, pointing to a cluster of buildings on the satellite photograph projected on the wall. "He's coordinating with local cell leaders about upcoming operations against our supply convoys. This is our best opportunity to take him off the board permanently." Sarah studied the terrain carefully, noting the elevation changes, potential shooting positions, and likely avenues of approach. The compound sat on a ridge overlooking a valley, with steep approaches on 3 sides and a single road winding up from the south. It was a fortress-like position that would be extremely difficult to assault without significant casualties. "The plan is straightforward," Mitchell continued. "We insert via helicopter 3 kilometers south of the target, move overland through the night, and establish positions before dawn. The sniper team will take overwatch positions on this ridgeline to the east, approximately 800 meters from the compound. At first light, we move in and capture or eliminate the target." Petty Officer First Class Rick Santos, a veteran SEAL with more than a decade of combat experience, raised his hand. "Commander, what's our intelligence on enemy strength at the compound?" "Conservative estimate is 12 to 15 fighters, possibly more," Mitchell replied. "They've got the high ground and good sight lines in every direction. That's why we need reliable overwatch to neutralize any external security and provide early warning of reinforcements." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. 800 meters was a challenging distance in perfect conditions, but in the mountains of Afghanistan, with wind, elevation changes, and the possibility of enemy movement, it would require every skill she had developed over years of training. After the briefing, as the SEALs dispersed to prepare their equipment, Mitchell approached Sarah and Jackson. "This is your first mission with us," he said, his tone neutral but his eyes evaluating. "I need to know that you understand what we're asking of you. These men will be exposed during the assault, counting on you to eliminate threats they can't see. There's no room for hesitation or second-guessing." "We understand, sir," Sarah replied. "You'll have the overwatch you need. Mitchell studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. Good. Your call sign for this operation will be Shadow 26. Report to the helicopter pad at 0330. And Sergeant, I hope Torres was right about your capabilities. As Mitchell walked away, Jackson turned to Sarah with concern evident on his young face. Shadow 26, he said quietly. That's the same call sign that Sergeant Rodriguez used before he got hit. Some of the guys think it's bad luck. Sarah shouldered her gear bag and rifle case. Jackson, the only luck that matters is the kind you make with proper preparation and steady hands. Let's go check our equipment. The next few hours passed in the methodical ritual of pre-mission preparation. Sarah disassembled and cleaned her rifle completely, checking every component for proper function. She verified her scope mounts, tested her laser rangefinder, and calculated firing solutions for various distances and conditions. Jackson prepared his spotting scope and communication equipment, reviewing the mission parameters and studying photos of the target area. At 0330, they joined the SEAL team at the helicopter pad. The night was clear but cold, with a sharp wind that carried the scent of dust and diesel fuel. Two Black Hawks sat ready on the tarmac, their rotors turning slowly as the pilots completed their pre-flight checks. Sarah noticed the looks she received from the SEALs as they loaded their equipment. Most were professional, but distant, still reserving judgment about her abilities. A few, however, showed obvious skepticism. She could see it in their body language, the way they checked and rechecked their own equipment as if compensating for a weak link in the chain. Chief Petty Officer Mike Harrison, the team's senior enlisted man, approached her as she secured her rifle case in the helicopter. Sergeant, I want you to know that these boys have been through hell together, he said, his voice barely audible over the engine noise. They trust each other with their lives because they've proven themselves under fire. You haven't had that chance yet, so don't take it personally if they seem a little cold. Just do your job, and everything will work out. Sarah nodded her understanding. She had heard similar speeches before, and she knew that respect had to be earned in combat, not given based on rank or qualifications. The flight to the insertion point took 45 minutes, most of it spent in silence, as each team member focused on the mission ahead. Sarah used the time to visualize the shooting positions she had studied in the satellite photos, running through various scenarios and calculating the adjustments she would need to make for wind and elevation. The helicopter set down in a small clearing surrounded by rocky hills, its engines barely audible in the thin mountain air. The team quickly disembarked and moved into a defensive perimeter while the aircraft lifted off and disappeared into the darkness. Commander Mitchell gathered the team around him and spoke in whispers. 2 hours to reach our positions. Shadow 26, you and Jackson moved to Overwatch Position Alpha and establish communications. We'll be moving to our assault positions along Route Bravo. Remember, radio discipline is critical. The enemy has monitoring equipment, so keep transmissions to an absolute minimum. The patrol moved out in single file, following a route that took advantage of natural cover and avoided known enemy observation points. Sarah found herself impressed by the professionalism and stealth of the SEAL team. They moved through the difficult terrain like ghosts, each man instinctively knowing his position and role. After 2 hours of careful movement through rocky ravines and steep slopes, they reached the Overwatch position. It was a natural formation of boulders that provided excellent concealment and clear fields of fire toward the target compound. Sarah and Jackson separated from the main team and worked their way to the highest point where they could establish their shooting position. The compound was clearly visible in the pre-dawn light, exactly as depicted in the intelligence photos. Sarah counted at least 6 guards moving around the perimeter, and she could see additional figures inside the buildings. Through her scope, she identified several positions that would need to be neutralized before the SEALs could approach safely. Shadow 2-6, in position. Jackson whispered into his radio. I count 6 external guards, multiple additional personnel inside the compound. Wind is 3 to 5 miles per hour from the west. Range to primary target building is 820 meters. Copy, Shadow 2-6, came Mitchell's response. We're moving to assault positions now. Stand by for targets of opportunity. Sarah settled into her shooting position, adjusting the bipod legs on her rifle and checking her scope settings one final time. The familiar weight of the weapon felt comfortable in her hands, and she controlled her breathing as she had been trained, letting her heart rate slow and her vision focus. Through her scope, she watched one of the guards walking a predictable patrol route along the compound's eastern wall. He was armed with an AK-47 and moved with the casual confidence of someone who didn't expect trouble. Every 30 seconds, he stopped at a corner position and scanned the surrounding area before continuing his route. Shadow 2-6, this is actual. Mitchell's voice crackled through her earpiece. We have movement on the south side. Can you confirm enemy strength? Jackson, watching through his spotting scope, responded immediately. Actual, I count 3 additional personnel moving between buildings on the south side. They appear to be carrying weapons. Sarah tracked her scope to the southern part of the compound and quickly identified the 3 men Jackson had spotted. They were moving with purpose, not the casual patrol behavior of the perimeter guards. Something had alerted them. Actual, Shadow 2-6, she whispered in her microphone. Enemy personnel on south side appear to be responding to something. They may have detected your approach. Copy that. Stand by to engage on my command. The next few minutes stretched like hours as Sarah watched the compound through her scope. The guards were becoming more alert, their movements less predictable. She could see them gathering at certain positions, clearly preparing for trouble. Then, everything changed in an instant. A burst of automatic weapons fire erupted from the southern approach to the compound, followed immediately by the distinctive sound of M4 rifles returning fire. The SEAL assault had been detected, and the battle was on. Shadow 2-6, engage targets of opportunity. Mitchell's voice cut through the chaos. We need that Eastern Guard position neutralized now. Sarah had already acquired her first target. The guard she had been watching was now in a position where he could bring effective fire against the assaulting SEALs. She controlled her breathing, let out half a breath, and gently squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and through her scope, she watched the guard drop instantly. 1 shot, 1 kill at a distance of over 800 meters. Target down, Jackson called out, already shifting his spotting scope to identify the next threat. Rooftop, northwest corner, he said urgently. Enemy with RPG. Sarah swung her rifle to the indicated position and immediately saw the threat. A fighter was positioning himself with a rocket-propelled grenade launcher, trying to get an angle on the SEALs below. At this distance, with the man partially concealed behind a low wall, it would be one of the most difficult shots of her career. She made rapid calculations for wind drift and bullet drop, adjusted her aim point slightly to the left to account for the target's expected movement, and fired. The shot was perfect. The enemy fighter collapsed, the RPG clattering uselessly off the roof. Beautiful shot, Jackson said with genuine admiration. That was at least 850 meters, partial concealment, moving target. But there was no time for congratulations. More targets were appearing as the compound's defenders responded to the attack. For the next 20 minutes, Sarah's rifle spoke repeatedly, each shot carefully aimed and devastatingly effective. Guards attempting to flank the SEAL position. A machine gunner trying to set up a defensive position. Fighters moving between buildings to reinforce threatened areas. With each target that fell to her precision fire, Sarah could hear the change in the radio chatter from the SEALs. The initial skepticism was being replaced by professional respect and genuine gratitude. Shadow 2-6, this is Bravo Team. came a voice she didn't recognize. "That last shot just saved our lives. Thank you." As the sun rose higher, the battle reached its climax. The SEALs had fought their way into the compound and were clearing buildings room by room. Ahmad Nazir had been located and was trapped in the main building with several bodyguards. Suddenly, Jackson spotted movement on a rooftop that the assault team couldn't see from their position. "Sniper on the southeast roof," he called urgently. "He's got a bead on the breach team." Sarah swung her rifle to the indicated position and saw an enemy sniper settling into position behind a low wall, his rifle aimed down at the SEALs preparing to enter the main building. The range was over 900 meters, and the target was mostly concealed with only his head and shoulders visible. This was the shot that would define her career. Miss, and good men would die. The mockery and doubt would be justified, and she would carry the weight of failure forever. But if she could make the shot under these conditions with lives hanging in the balance, Sarah steadied her breathing and felt the familiar calm that came in moments of absolute focus. The world narrowed to just her rifle, her scope, and the target. She made her final calculations, adjusted for the increased range and wind, and placed the crosshairs exactly where they needed to be. The trigger broke cleanly, and the rifle fired. Through her scope, she watched the enemy sniper's head snap back as her bullet found its mark. "Target neutralized," Jackson said quietly. "That was incredible shooting." Over the radio, Commander Mitchell's voice carried a note of genuine awe. "Shadow 2-6, I don't know who you are, but that last shot was impossible. You just saved my breach team." The battle was essentially over. Within another hour, Ahmad Nazir had been killed during the final assault, and the compound was secured. The helicopter extraction went smoothly, and by noon, the team was back at Forward Operating Base Chapman. As Sarah climbed down from the Black Hawk, she found herself surrounded by the same SEALs who had looked at her with skepticism just hours earlier. But now their expressions were completely different. Chief Harrison was the first to approach her. "Sergeant Chun," he said, extending his hand, "I owe you an apology. That was some of the finest shooting I've ever seen. You saved lives today." Commander Mitchell appeared beside her as she was securing her equipment. "Chun, I need to talk to you," he said quietly. "That shooting today, I've been in this business for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like it. 900-meter shots in combat conditions, multiple kills with perfect accuracy under pressure. Who the hell are you?" Sarah looked at the SEAL commander and saw genuine curiosity and respect in his eyes. "Just a soldier doing her job, sir," she replied. Mitchell shook his head. "No, there's more to it than that. Nobody shoots like that without serious training and natural ability. I'm putting you in for a commendation, and I'm requesting that you be permanently assigned to our operations." As word of the mission spread through the base, Sarah found herself treated with a completely different level of respect. The mocking whispers had been replaced by genuine admiration and professional acknowledgement. Soldiers who had ignored her presence now nodded respectfully when she passed. But the real change was yet to come. Within 48 hours, her performance during the mission had been reported up the chain of command, catching the attention of people who operated in the highest levels of military special operations. The mockery phase of her deployment was over. Now came something far more dangerous: recognition. 2 weeks after the successful elimination of Ahmad Nazir, Sarah Chun had become something of a legend at Forward Operating Base Chapman. Her impossible shots during the compound assault had been analyzed by military marksmen, and the consensus was unanimous. Her performance had been nothing short of extraordinary. But with that recognition came scrutiny, and scrutiny had a way of uncovering secrets that were meant to stay buried. Sarah was cleaning her rifle in the armory when Commander Mitchell appeared in the doorway, his expression uncharacteristically serious. Behind him stood a man Sarah had never seen before, tall, lean, wearing civilian clothes that couldn't quite hide his military bearing. "Chun, I need you to come with me," Mitchell said quietly. Leave your weapon here. Something in his tone made Sarah's instincts flare. This wasn't a routine request. She secured her rifle and followed Mitchell and the stranger to a small office in the base headquarters that she had never been inside before. The walls were bare except for a few official photographs, and the furniture was standard military issue. But the man behind the desk definitely was not. He was perhaps 50 years old, with silver gray hair and pale blue eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of her appearance. He wore no uniform and no rank insignia, but everyone in the room deferred to him. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Staff Sergeant Shun," he said without preamble. "Please have a seat. I'm Colonel Williams, though my official title is less important than the fact that I've been looking for you for a very long time." Sarah felt her blood chill. She had known this moment might come eventually, but she had hoped to complete her deployment before anyone connected the dots. Slowly, she sat in the chair across from Williams, keeping her expression neutral. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir," she said carefully. Williams smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Oh, I think you know exactly what I mean. You see, after your performance 2 weeks ago, I ordered a very thorough background check. Your official records are exemplary, of course. Sniper school, advanced marksmanship training, exemplary service record. But there's some interesting gaps." He opened a file folder on the desk and pulled out several photographs. Sarah's heart rate increased as she recognized them. Surveillance photos from various locations around the world, some dating back several years. "Sarajevo, 2019, Williams said, placing the first photo on the desk. "A war crimes suspect shot at 930 meters while boarding a helicopter. Single shot, perfect kill, no witnesses. The local authorities never found the shooter." Sarah kept her expression blank, but inside she was calculating distances to the door, assessing the threat level of everyone in the room. "Damascus, 2020, Williams continued, placing another photo. "An ISIS commander eliminated while meeting with arms dealers. Again, extreme range, perfect shot, no trace of the shooter. Are we seeing a pattern here, Sergeant?" Commander Mitchell, who had been silent until now, looked stunned. "What the hell is going on here, Colonel?" Williams ignored him and placed a third photo on the desk. "And my personal favorite, Mogadishu, 2021. A hostage situation involving American aid workers. The terrorist leader was eliminated by a sniper shot of over 1,000 meters through a window in high wind conditions. The hostages were rescued, but the shooter vanished without a trace." Sarah finally spoke, her voice steady despite the situation. "I don't know what you're implying, Colonel, but I've never been to any of those locations." "Haven't you?" Williams leaned back in his chair. "Because according to certain classified records that I have access to, there was indeed a highly trained operator working those missions. Someone with a very specific set of skills and a very particular code name." The room fell silent except for the humming of the air conditioning unit. Sarah could feel Commander Mitchell's eyes on her, confusion and suspicion warring in his expression. Williams reached into his file and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Tell me, Sergeant, does the designation Ghost 7 mean anything to you?" The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Ghost 7, the code name she had carried for 3 years while operating in the deepest levels of military black operations. The identity that officially did not exist, supported by documents that would disappear if anyone tried to trace them, backed by an organization so classified that most high-level military officers had never heard of it. "I see from your reaction that it does," Williams observed with satisfaction. Ghost 7, the most effective long-range elimination specialist in the history of American covert operations. 17 confirmed kills, all at extreme range, all in situations where conventional military action was impossible. Commander Mitchell stood up abruptly, his face flushed with anger and confusion. "Colonel, what the hell are you saying? Are you telling me that one of my soldiers is some kind of assassin. Williams held up a hand to forestall Mitchell's protest. Sit down, Commander. What I'm telling you is that Sergeant Chin here is far more than just a soldier. She's a ghost, a phantom, someone who can appear anywhere, eliminate any target, and disappear without leaving a trace. And according to my sources, she's been inactive for the past 18 months. Sarah finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. Colonel, I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm just a sniper doing my job. If you have evidence of wrongdoing, I suggest you present it through proper channels. Williams laughed, a sound without humor. Wrongdoing? Sergeant, you misunderstand. I'm not here to arrest you. I'm here to recruit you back. The statement hung in the air like smoke. Mitchell looked back and forth between Williams and Sarah, clearly struggling to process what he was hearing. Recruit her back to what? Mitchell demanded. Williams ignored him and focused entirely on Sarah. The organization you worked for needs Ghost 7 operational again. There are targets that require your particular skills. Situations that demand someone who can make impossible shots and vanish without a trace. Sarah felt the familiar cold calculation settling over her mind. This was the moment she had been dreading since she walked away from her old life. She had hoped that by becoming a regular soldier, by serving openly and honestly, she could leave Ghost 7 behind forever. But some things once done could never be undone. I'm out, she said simply. That life is over. Williams shook his head. I'm afraid it doesn't work that way. You see, Ghost 7 was never officially discharged from her previous assignment. She simply went dark, stopped responding to communications, and assumed a new identity. That's called desertion in some circles. The threat was clear, and Sarah felt her old instincts kicking in. Williams wasn't just offering her a job. He was giving her an ultimatum. Return to her role as Ghost 7, or face the consequences of abandoning her post. Commander Mitchell, who had been listening with growing alarm, finally exploded. This is insane. You people can't just come in here and claim one of my soldiers for some shadow operation. Chun is assigned to my unit, and she's performed admirably. Whatever she may or may not have done in the past is irrelevant. Williams turned to Mitchell with the patient expression of someone explaining something to a child. Commander, you still don't understand what you're dealing with. The woman you know as Staff Sergeant Chun eliminated 17 high-value targets across 4 continents. She's personally responsible for preventing 3 terrorist attacks, dismantling 2 arms trafficking networks, and eliminating some of the most dangerous people on Earth. She is quite literally a national asset. Sarah watched the interplay between the 2 men and realized that her carefully constructed new life was crumbling around her. Everything she had worked for, the respect she had earned, the simple pleasure of being just another soldier, was about to disappear. What exactly are you asking me to do? She said quietly. William smiled and pulled another folder from his briefcase. There's a situation developing in Eastern Europe. An arms dealer who has acquired certain materials that could be used to create dirty bombs. He's well protected, surrounded by security, and conventional military action would create an international incident. Sarah didn't need to hear the rest. She knew exactly what Williams was describing. Another impossible shot, another target eliminated from extreme range, another ghost operation that would never officially exist. And if I refuse? She asked. Williams' expression hardened. Then, Staff Sergeant Chun will find herself facing court-martial for desertion, espionage, and violation of her security clearances. She'll spend the rest of her life in military prison, assuming she lives long enough to serve her sentence. The room fell silent again. Sarah stared at the folder Williams had placed on the desk, knowing that inside were photos of her next target, intelligence reports, and all the information she would need to plan another perfect kill. Commander Mitchell stepped forward, his voice tight with controlled anger. Colonel, I don't know what authority you think you have here, but Sergeant Chun is under my command. Any reassignment needs to go through proper channels. Williams turned to Mitchell with an expression of mild annoyance. "Commander, let me clarify something for you. Ghost 7 doesn't exist in any official capacity. There are no records, no paper trail, no proper channels. There's only the mission and the target. And right now, Sergeant Chun needs to decide whether she wants to continue playing soldier or return what she does best." Sarah looked up at Mitchell and saw genuine concern in his eyes. This man, who had been skeptical of her abilities just weeks ago, was now trying to protect her from being dragged back into a world he couldn't possibly understand. "It's all right, Commander," she said softly. "I understand the situation." Mitchell shook his head. "No, it's not all right. You're one of my people now, and I don't abandon my people." The loyalty in his voice touched something in Sarah that she thought she had buried forever. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to refuse Williams, to face court-martial, to accept whatever consequences came from walking away from Ghost 7. But she knew the reality of her situation. People like Williams didn't make idle threats, and organizations like the one that had created Ghost 7 didn't accept resignation. "When do I leave?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. Williams smiled with genuine satisfaction. "Tonight, there's a transport waiting at Bagram that will take you to Germany, and from there to your operational staging area. Your equipment and cover identity are already prepared." Sarah nodded slowly, then turned to Commander Mitchell. "Sir, it's been an honor serving with your team. Please tell the others that I was reassigned to classified operations. They'll understand." Mitchell's jaw clenched, but he nodded. "Chun, Sarah, whatever they call you, you're always welcome with us. Don't forget that." As Sarah stood to leave, Williams called after her. "Oh, and Sergeant, your new code name for this operation will be Phantom. Ghost 7 is being retired permanently. Consider it a fresh start." Sarah paused at the door, then looked back at Williams with an expression that made him unconsciously step backward. "Colonel," she said quietly, "there are some things you should understand about ghosts. We don't retire. We don't disappear. And we never forget who created us." As she walked out of the office, Sarah heard Williams telling Mitchell that everything he had witnessed was classified at the highest levels and could never be discussed with anyone. But what Williams didn't know, what he couldn't possibly understand, was that Sarah Chun had learned something during her time as a regular soldier that Ghost 7 had never possessed: loyalty, friendship, and the knowledge that some things were worth more than perfect missions and impossible shots. Phantom might complete this assignment. She might eliminate the target and vanish without a trace, just as Ghost 7 always had. But Sarah Chun would remember who her real friends were, and someday, when the opportunity arose, there would be a reckoning for Colonel Williams and the shadowy organization that thought it on her soul. The plane to Germany took off at midnight, carrying Sarah away from the only place she had ever felt truly at home. But as the lights of Afghanistan disappeared below her, she made a promise to herself. This would be the last time anyone pulled her strings. Ghost 7 was dead. Phantom would complete her mission. But someday, somehow, Sarah Chun would be free. The SEAL commander stopped cold at her code name, but he had no idea that the real ghost was just beginning to haunt the people who thought they controlled her.